Russian war correspondents have acknowledged the dire situation facing their troops in the Pokrovsk sector. They claim that Ukrainian forces have allegedly encircled the occupiers in 3 cauldrons, effectively cutting off their escape routes. The situation is catastrophic. The troops are almost completely surrounded, the losses are enormous, and the consequences will be felt for a long time, writes one of the Z War correspondents. At the same time, Viktor Tregubov, spokesman for the Dnipro Joint Forces Group, told Ukrainian media that it was too early to talk about a full-fledged encirclement. He stated that there are several areas where Russian units are indeed under heavy pressure, but it remains to be seen whether they will be able to escape. The situation for the occupiers is complicated by the actions of Ukrainian drones, which are successfully tracking and destroying enemy supply columns. Attempts to transport reinforcements to the Pokrovsk area are resulting in losses for Russia, exacerbating the crisis for its troops. The situation is even more tense in the Dobropillia sector. According to military observer Denis Popovich, Ukrainian forces have formed 3 encirclements, which threaten to encircle units of the Russian 51st Army and former militants of the so-called DPR. If these forces are routed, the northern part of the semi-encirclement the Russians attempted to create around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad will completely collapse. At the same time, Osinters emphasized that the enemy is attempting to redeploy Marines and airborne assault units to lift the siege. According to Dmitry Zhmailo, executive director of the Center for Security and Cooperation, this is the largest redeployment of Russian forces since 2022. According to Russian military correspondents, Ukrainian drones are tracking reinforcements and convoys, destroying any supplies. The situation is catastrophic. The troops are almost surrounded. There are not enough people, the losses are huge, and the consequences will be felt for a long time, admits propagandist Podolyaka. Ukrainian Army Forces Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky confirmed that individual groups of occupiers had managed to advance 12 to 20 kilometers. However, he said, Ukrainian forces had anticipated this scenario and trapped the enemy in a sort of pocket. Airborne assault force units from the north and south closed the line along the Kazeni-Torets River, depriving the Russians of any room to maneuver. Syrsky emphasized that Russia had thus effectively failed its spring-summer campaign. Moreover, Ukrainian counter-offensives forced the occupiers to abandon their plans to attack Novopavlivka, and the forces deployed there are now suffering heavy losses near Dobropillia. Recall, in the north Slobizansky and Kursk directions, Ukrainian troops successfully repelled several attacks, destroying enemy equipment. Russian forces also conducted aviation strikes and shelling from rocket systems. Ukrainian troops are effectively defending their territory along the entire front line, conducting counterattack and inflicting significant losses on the enemy. Despite enemy aggression, Ukrainian defenders continue to stand guard over their country, demonstrating determination in defending their territories.
The UN Security Council on Friday rejected a last-ditch effort to delay reimposing sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program, a decision that the country's president immediately called unfair, unjust, and illegal. According to Associated Press, the decision on the snapback sanctions came a day before the deadline and after Western countries claimed weeks of meetings failed to result in a concrete agreement. The resolution put forth by Russia and China, Iran's most powerful and closest allies on the 15-member council, failed to garner support from the 9 countries required to halt the series of UN sanctions from taking effect Saturday, as outlined in Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. The vote was 4-9 with 2 abstentions. We had hoped that European colleagues and the US would think twice, and they would opt for the path of diplomacy and dialogue instead of their clumsy blackmail, which merely results in escalation of the situation in the region, Dmitry Polyansky, the deputy Russian ambassador to the UN, said during the meeting. Shortly after the vote, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian spoke at a meeting with journalists and Iran experts on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, a day before the deadline for the sanctions to kick in. Pezeshkian said that despite previous threats, Iran won't withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty like North Korea, which abandoned the treaty in 2003 and then built atomic weapons. Barring an 11th-hour deal, the reinstatement of sanctions triggered by Britain, France, and Germany will once again freeze Iranian assets abroad, halt arms deals with Tehran, and penalize any development of Iran's ballistic missile program, among other measures. But despite previous threats to withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, Pezeshkian said in an interview with a group of reporters that the country had no intention to do so right now. North Korea, which abandoned the treaty in 2003, went on to build atomic weapons.
Those against?
United Nations sanctions on Iran over its long-contested nuclear program are set to be reimposed. Now, these sanctions will come back into effect at basically just after midnight on Sunday. That's in GMT time, 8 p.m. Eastern in the United States. And that's because a last-minute effort by both China and Russia failed to get across the line at the United Nations Security Council, putting these sanctions in play.
Iran is defying the global non-proliferation regime. Iran's nuclear escalation, as detailed in over 60 IAEA reports over the past 6 years, is a threat to international peace and security.
3 European countries, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, had started a 30-day clock to start the sanctions. They say it was over Iran refusing to cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as not engaging in direct negotiations with the United States over the nuclear program. And these sanctions come back as Iran, broadly speaking, is poorer, hungrier, and more fearful in recent weeks. The Iranian rial currency has just collapsed. It's at its lowest recorded level ever against the US dollar. That's made food and other essentials that much more expensive for Iranians. Meanwhile, Iran is still reeling after that 12-day war launched by Israel against the country in June. That war also saw the Americans launch strikes on Iranian nuclear sites as well. So all that put together makes a very dangerous moment in the Middle East that is still reeling from the Israel-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip. So these sanctions are set to be reimposed, and how Iran responds and what Israel potentially does remains in question.
The United States has betrayed diplomacy, but it is the E3 which have buried it. This sordid mess did not come about overnight. Both the E3 and the US have consistently misrepresented Iran's peaceful nuclear program.